So the topic for today is self-publishing versus traditional publishing. I do like to try to post a free webinar in the group at least once a month. I am busy. I'm not even going to lie. I have my business. I have kids. I have my own books. And so sometimes I don't get to it, but for the most part, I try to keep it up at least monthly. So make sure you check out the group. Make sure you check out the past videos because it's really good information in those. But this is my webinar for this month, and then I'll post the one for next month coming up here soon because it is next week, which I can't even like believe March is next week already. It was just Christmas, like, you know, but so anyway, so before I get started on my presentation, I want to ask anybody here, is there any questions in particular that you are looking to get answered in the webinar today, so I can make sure I cover them when I get to that topic. And if I don't cover them, I can make sure I do so at the end. So is there anything in particular that you're looking for with the topic of self-publishing versus traditional publishing?
For me, packaging. I'm a certified life coach, like you're a coach. And then on top of that, I'm an author. So how to use my book as like momentum to get to my coaching.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. I can answer that. Hello, Jennifer. Thanks for joining. Today is a webinar, a free webinar talking about self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And right now, before I get started on my presentation, I just want to know, is there anything in particular you guys, you ladies, because it looks like there's a bunch of ladies here, are interested in learning in this webinar so I can make sure I cover it if I have that information. So Artesia talked about wanting to package her books with her coaching business, which is very, very good, by the way. So I'll make sure I cover that. Is there anything else that anybody has any questions about specifically?
I have another one. As far as in copywriting, do we publish after we copyright? And how does that work?
Okay.
And I would like to know a couple of things. Understanding the jacket of the book, just to see what really needs to be on the jacket of the book. When it comes to publication, I think the kit, the publishing, like the media kit, when you are promoting that book or, you know, wanting to, especially trying to get it out to a publisher, to try to, you know, to get, I guess, representation. And I think the last thing also when it came to, I do apologize, I'm not for sure what the young lady name is that spoke before me. She says, what is it? My mind just went blank. I wanted to actually piggyback off of her, but my mind just went blank.
No,
she said,
go ahead.
What did she say that she wanted to know? Because it was something on that I wanted to.
Copyright.
Oh,
she wanted to know.
Yeah, copyright.
Yeah.
So should we copyright our book before we send it to a publisher for representation to that publisher, or should we send the book first? I guess the manuscript or along with the before we copyright it, because I don't know if there'd be like an issue if we copyright the book and then they turn around and then want to publish the book on our behalf. But so how would that work? So that was my question on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, copywriting before sending. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions before we get started? Those are very good questions, by the way.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what are the advantages? I mean, no, that's not the question. What is your suggestion or anyone else's suggestion about the difference between publishing exclusively on Amazon or going wider, having several different avenues to sell the books?
Okay. All right, I believe I can answer all of these questions. But so very good questions. So let me dive into the presentation and I will cover those questions when I think it pertains to the content that I'm going over. If I don't, then I will make sure I answer them before we wrap up. This should not take any more than about 30-40 minutes. So So yeah, I'll answer those. So let me get started on the presentation. Where is my screen share button? I hope my computer doesn't act up now because I don't need that. Okay, so here we go. Share. Okay, can everybody see the screen? It should say the history of publishing. Does everybody see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I want to let you all know that this presentation that I'm doing is a part of a class that I am actually in the process of doing right now called Everything You Need to Know to Write a Book. So it's 8 sessions long, they're 1 hour each, and this particular section is over self-publishing versus traditional publishing. I run this course at least 3 to 4 times a year. And I'm at the tail end of it now. I will restart it again in April. And so I'll send the information out for anybody to sign up for that course if they're interested. Also, please make sure you share with other people that you know that are writers that might be interested. There's a lot of good information in the course, and a lot of it is things that took me years to learn. You know, it's like when you're starting out as a writer, you need to know so much, especially if you want to go the self-publishing route. And over the process of kind of trial and error, you kind of pick up these things. So I think it is priceless if you're serious about writing to have all this information kind of gift wrapped for you and given to you without you having to search for it everywhere. Because I don't think there's any place that you can find all this information together the way that I have it. So just keep that in mind. And again, I'll post about that in the group. And so let me move this out of my way. Okay, so this particular session that I do is on self-publishing and traditional publishing. And I start off by giving people an idea about the history of publishing. And so, you know, before we get into the publishing, I talk about how the evolution of writing. And so I talk about how writing developed, but it became very popular. It first developed as a means for keeping records. And then after a while, people started to use it for more creative things, for spreading ideas and things like that. And then of course you have literature, but then soon after, writing started to take off and become more widespread, because if you keep in mind, there was not a lot of reason to know how to read back then. So most of the people that could read and write were kind of like upper class or professional people. So the average public did not know how to read. But of course, as time went on and societies became more advanced, people started learning how to read. And actually, when I said soon after writing began, scribes saw the need for copying their writings, because if you only have something documented, written in one place, it can't spread very far. So in order to get copies of it and pass it around, or you have this one thing that once it's destroyed or it gets misplaced, it's gone, the need for being able to copy things that you've written became very, very essential. And so again, they didn't have copy machines and things like that at the time. So if they wanted to copy something, they had to copy it by hand. So if you can imagine, everything needed to be copied by hand, regardless of how long or how short it is, it's really going to diminish the ability to spread anything written around a large group of people. So of course, this reduced the ability for common people to have access to document and works. And again, it did not give people a lot of incentive for knowing how to read. But in 1450, metal movable type was invented by Johannes Gutenberg. That is the picture that you see here to the, which is my right. I'm not sure how everybody else is seeing it. And by the 19th century, the process was mechanized, making it cheaper and faster to produce books. And so with that, the literacy rates rose and it became more widely available of different writings from different people, and people started having the incentive for knowing how to read. And so once that happened, and movable type and production of written materials became more, it became easier to distribute them. New methods of printing materials. Excuse me, sometimes I get tongue-tied. So with new advances in printing, printed materials expanded significantly. However, for authors, the pathway to getting published stayed pretty much the same. So if you look at everything that I've talked about from a standpoint of being a writer, if you're a writer and you have a passion for writing, but there's really no solid means to distribute your writings, it's going to really reduce the incentive of being a writer. It's going to reduce the ability for you to gain an audience for what you're doing. And so, but now that people could produce more written materials, writing took off. So authors started really like, oh, now I have an avenue for getting my stuff out there and things like that. I mean, I'm pretty sure there were some great writers at that time who just did not have the means to get their writing out there. And so now that this means was created, and which is, you know, we should be thankful for today, of course, that we have the opportunity to do that. But this now opened the floodgates for authors to be able to now come up with ways to get their works published. So one of the things is that self-publishing in this model was very expensive and risky, because the people who own the movable type and the printing companies didn't want to have to produce a bunch of writing materials that they were not going to make money on. You know, they have to support their business they're doing too. So if they were to produce a piece of writing for someone, they wanted a means to be able to make their money back for doing that. So that was easier to do if you had an agent or somebody made an agreement with you, which I will go into some of the agreements that they made back then for authors, but it made it almost impossible for self-published authors to get published because it was just too expensive, and no publishing, anyone who had the ability to distribute and publish really just didn't want to take the risk. However, in 1990, the creation of the internet gave authors another avenue to publish their work. So now people can get stuff out, get their ideas out there. I'm trying to think in terms of fiction or nonfiction, but basically get their ideas out without having to spend anything, if they had access to the internet, they didn't have to spend any money. So the internet gave writers an avenue to publish their work without having to go through anybody. And so after 1990, another big boom for self-published authors was Amazon. So Amazon made it easy to sell books online. So I don't know if we all know Amazon now as basically the gigantic online shopping mall, but they first started out selling books. And because they were such a huge platform selling books, they actually created an avenue to sell books online. They were probably one of the first few people to do that. By them doing that, of course, it increased exposure for authors and made it easier to sell books online. So before, you had to go to the bookstore or go to the library, things like that. So there was not a lot of different avenues for writers. You know, it was growing, but it was still a lot of restriction. But Amazon kind of opened the floodgates for that one. And then digital printing in 1989 paved the way for on-demand printing. So on-demand printing then exploded, and it just took the bottle top off of the whole process, because one of the main reasons that all these restrictions were there, or these limitations, was because of the cost of printing. But digital printing just made it so cheap that now self-published authors had a means to get their works published without having to have a bunch of money, because that's kind of what you needed before then. If you didn't have a lot of money or you didn't have a deal, it was almost impossible to get published. Then the internet gave a little bit more of an avenue, but it still wasn't books, it was just blogs and things like that. And then digital printing, now a book that would probably take, you know, because before you couldn't get single books made. It had to be on a large printing press. They wanted to have a certain amount of copies. They wanted to make their money back from those copies that they created. But now digital printing made it where you can make one copy of a book very easily and for almost nothing. And so it really blew the lid off of it and opened the door for self-published authors to actually have a career and access to readers through self-publishing. So I have some notes here I want to read. It says, so with all of this stuff that I'm talking to you about, two models kind of surface when it comes to traditional publishing. I would say at that time, there was no self-publishing. It just was too risky. But traditional publishing at that time was that the authors would get an upfront payment for their book, and you would have to sign away the rights to your book to a company that had the ability to print and distribute your books. So you would get an upfront payment and you would sign away the rights to your book. The publisher would keep all the profits until the cost of the production and the advance payment had been recovered. And then after that, you would get royalties on your book for every other copy sold, but the royalties were only between 10 and 20%. So this is what authors would have to look forward to before all of this stuff, or even the process of this stuff, if they wanted to get their books printed. And so again, I'm kind of go back just a little bit. So CreateSpace launched in 2002 and exploded the self-publishing market, which I basically talked about before. So CreateSpace was by Amazon. They don't have CreateSpace anymore. Now it's called, I think it's Amazon KDP or Kindle KDP. I'm sorry, I know the name, but it's not coming to my mind now. So it used to be called CreateSpace, and that was a platform to help self-published authors get published. And so Amazon was the first to do that, and that's when the self-publishing market kind of exploded around that time, and then they transitioned over to what they have now, which is the Kindle KDP platform. So, so now with everything that I just kind of talked about, you basically have two main options for publishing as a writer. One is traditional publishing and the other is self-publishing. So traditional publishing is when an established publisher offers a contract to a writer. So if you remember what I said, this is the same system that was in place before digital publishing, before the internet or anything. So that one has prevailed. And so that is when an established publisher offers a contract to a writer or author to print, publish, sell, and market their book. This typically means that the publisher buys the right to a book and pays the author royalties. Those would change depending on the market you're in, the book that you have, the platform that you have. So it's not actually set in stone, but it varies. But typically, authors who do traditional publishing don't really get a lot of royalties for their books. I will say that. It's better than it used to be, because now back then it was like between 10 and 20%, and I have the numbers here soon about how much you can expect now. But basically the publisher gets the chunk of the profits and everything from the book. So another one is self-publishing. And that's when a writer publishes their work at their own expense and without the involvement of an established publisher. Self-publishing, of course, has become more affordable with the internet, with the invention of on-demand printing and the internet. Okay, so that's it for that. So they also have something called hybrid publishing. It's also known as author-assisted publishing, independent publishing, partnership publishing, vanity publishing, co-publishing, and entrepreneurial publishing. But all of these are basically a mixture of traditional publishing and self-publishing. So it's basically like with traditional publishing, they take on everything and they buy the rights to your book. And with self-publishing, you pay for everything and everything is up to you. Hybrid is like a combination of that, to where you pay them some money and they cover some stuff, and then they also assist you with some stuff. So it's like you're not completely on your own like you would be in self-publishing, but you don't have all the costs covered for you up front like traditional publishing. This is not as popular as self-publishing and traditional publishing, but it's starting to grow a little bit more, and you just have to kind of find the companies that do this if this is something you're interested in. Here we go. I just said that it's a combination of the traditional publishing process with some upfront costs to the author. So with traditional publishing, you need to find an agent, and you need to find the right agent, because a lot of the genres that you go into, you're going to have an agent that has expertise in that genre. So if you want to publish a cookbook, you do not need, of course, an agent that deals in children's books. So you have to find the agent that's the right fit for the genre that you want to publish into. So when you do your research to look for an agent, you need to make sure that agent deals with those with your genre. You can check websites like writersmarket.com or Writers Digest magazine to connect you with those agents that deal in the genre that you're in. So of course, with traditional publishing, with self-publishing, of course, you don't need an agent. So let me explain the role of an agent really quickly. So I talked about the publishing thing. So when you have these companies who created this means to duplicate written works, they at first they were the publishers of books, but the market started to grow, and the people who are reproducing the books can't always sift through all these inquiries into their publishing at the same time while they're trying to work on the book. And so it's like, in order to weed it out, and it's just like when you have people who do temporary employment companies, they basically work for the company to help find people to work for them. So they just want to deal with their work. They don't want to deal with the hiring process. They'll give the job to you. You find the people for us, and then you connect them back to us. So an agent is that middleman that you go through between the writer and the publisher. So they sift through all the people who are interested, want to get their book published, and then they tell the publisher, this is who we think you should take a gamble on. This is a book that we think you should buy. This is what we're endorsing to you. So you have to find an agent if you want to be go the traditional publishing route. Publishers now, they don't even talk to authors themselves. You have to go through an agent. Some of them will tell you right away, even if you try to send them information, like, let me just send them this information and maybe they'll like it so much that they'll make an exception for me. They will most likely immediately throw it in the trash. They want you to go to the agent. So it just helps to fine tune their process. It cuts back on costs for them. And so you need to have an agent if you want to go the traditional publishing route. Another way that you can find an agent, besides the two websites that I listed here, is to attend book fairs and festivals and things like that. It can be very, very difficult to find an agent, and I'll go through some of the things that you need to have in order to attract an agent. But you might as well be prepared for it to be a little bit long of a process unless an agent reaches out to you. I've have people who told me they put their books in these different places and somebody reached out to them, so that's possible too. So another thing that can help you when it comes to an agent is if you have a platform or fan base already. So I know when I was sending out my inquiry letters to agents, that was what I heard back most often. They asked me, do I have a platform? And what that means is that, do you have a fan base of people who already know who you are that you can grow from? If you're somebody that nobody knows who you are, you don't have, especially nowadays, because we didn't have, I didn't have websites and stuff like they do now at this time. But if you don't have a website, if you don't have a social media following and things like that, to show them that them spending the money to promote your book is going to come back to them and it's going to be lucrative, a lot of times they will not, they don't want to take the chance on you, especially if you're not a well-known person. So you need to have a platform or fan base. It helps. I won't say it eliminates you completely if you don't have that, but it makes them more willing to take a chance on you when you do. So nonfiction books require a book proposal, at least 3 sample chapters with a synopsis. So this is stuff you're going to put together for the agent. So you need a book proposal. And for a nonfiction one, you need to have at least 3 sample chapters written already with a synopsis, which is a short paragraph or 2 about what your book is about. So you need that to go with your book proposal when to submit it to the agent for them to consider your writing. Fiction requires a complete manuscript, but this will vary from, agent to agent. So you, again, after you do your research, figure out what agents you want, you can see what they will require of you and basically have a checklist. Okay, they want this, they want this, they want that. Some of this stuff you can have done ahead of time. You might have to make different changes to it. depending on who you send it to, but you're going to need a book proposal. This is how you're going to get their attention and for them to take a chance in your book. I kind of went backwards a little bit because first thing you need is a query letter. So excuse that. So you need a query letter. I meant to change this and I forgot to. The query letter comes first. So the query letter is basically an introduction to who you are and your book to them. If they like your query letter, then they will ask you to send the book proposal. The book proposal goes in much more detail about what you offer as a writer, your book topic, who you are, things like that. So you send the query letter first, and then after that, they will request a book proposal if they're interested. And so a book proposal is basically a pitch for your book. It explains why your book idea is sellable and the market and marketable in today's market, and it persuades the publisher to invest their resources in your work. This is usually done before you finish writing the book. So if it requires research, it should be between 10 and 25 double-spaced pages, and that's without the chapters. So this is actually will take you some time to pull it together. So it's not just a quick thing. The book proposal, the query letter will be quick. The book proposal is in much more detail. It's almost like a research paper. If any of you are college graduates or whatever, you have that in mind of doing those long research papers in college. So it's kind of on the level with that. A query letter is a one-page pitch to stir agents' interest in your work, and it should have a synopsis of your book, which I already said. You also want to include the market or the audience your book is meant for, and of course, a short description of yourself. If you have an agent and you give them your query letter and then they request your book proposal again is going to go in much more detail about the sellability of your book. You will have to do a little bit of research in the market for that. And so after you get your query letter, they'll ask you for your book proposal. If they like what they are reading, then that's when they will offer you a contract. When they offer you a contract for your book, make sure you have a lawyer go over the contract with you. They use a lot of language in that industry that you're not going to fully understand. You don't want the wool to be pulled over your eyes. You don't want to be so excited that you got a contract that you take whatever they give you. You can easily find a lawyer to just, you don't have to have a lawyer or retainer for any of this, but just to make sure you have somebody that can go over it with you. You can easily pay them for that. It is worth it to do that unless you have so many book ideas that you just want to get your foot in the door and you kind of willing to give that book away for whatever it is, whatever the risk, just to kind of get the door open for you. But you really want to have somebody go through the contract for you to make sure it's on the up and up. So the contract that you're offered may or may not include an advance. If you're not a very well-known author, there might not be an advance at all. But if what they really like your idea and maybe you have some weight under your belt to show that you're gonna be it's gonna be in their advantage, then they may offer you an advance on your book. But you just keep an eye on all those numbers and things like that, because people get cheated that way a lot. So you also don't want to have like unreasonable expectations about what they should give you, because sometimes for your first book, people just really want a lot. It's their baby, they love it, they've been working on it for years. And then when you get these numbers that just look like they're not valuing your work, you might not want to do any deal. And if you don't, that's fine. You can still go the self-publishing route, but you need to have really realistic expectations about the type of deals that they will offer you, because they are covering a lot of the costs up front that will cost you much more money to do on your own. So you just have to keep all of that stuff in mind if you go the traditional publishing route. So I have this slide here just to kind of go through the steps a little bit more. It probably can explain it a little bit more clearly than I just did. But so first you have, it says the writer writes, and then you pitch what you have written to an agent, and that's with your query letter and your book proposal. Then the agent who agrees to represent the book for 15% of all future earnings, that's when you get your deal or your contract. And then the agent submits to the publishing house. So the agent already has relationship with different publishing houses that they work with, and certain publishing houses only are interested in publishing certain books. That's why I say you need to find the right agent for your book. So once that they, make the agreement with you, they will submit the book, your idea to the publishing house on your behalf. And then that's where an editor will get involved and start to fix up your book and get it ready to distribute it. The author pays, the house pays the author an advance against future sales. Of course, that's not always the case, but ideally we would like to see that happen. And then the publishing house puts together a team of pros to polish and produce the book. The team also works with the writer as the writer works to connect with readers through various channels. This is basically marketing. They're going to help you get your book out there, because not only does the agent have a relationship with publisher, the publisher has a relationship with bookstores, and they use all of their connections to promote your book. Again, as a self-publisher, you don't have access to these things. So you just have to keep this stuff in mind. After, of course, readers read your book and people start buying it, after the house earns back the advance that they gave you, the writer gets paid a percentage for each book sold, usually around 15%. So this is not very, very much. Again, it's better than it used to be. If you have a platform or a base, you can probably negotiate this percentage, up a little bit. But this is basically the process from traditional publishing. So I think this would be a good time to answer some of the questions that you all asked before, which is, so Jennifer said, should you copyright before? Okay, so I would say, so Jennifer asked, should you copyright before you send it to an agent? I can do some research on this to give you a more definite answer, but me personally, with the information that I have thus far, I would say yes. You want to protect your book by any means, because somebody else can get your book in the process of you sending it out, and they can, steal your book. And that's basically what copywriting does. It gives you something to stand on to say, this is mine. This is not Sally's or Joe's. I created this. And if you don't have that copywritten proof that you created it, it can turn into, you might lose your book, honestly. It can turn into court, if you want to go the process of suing somebody and stuff like that, it can turn into a mess. So I would say yes, you definitely need to copyright your book yourself before you start sending it out to people, because if somebody steals your book, I think the chance of somebody stealing your book is not very high, especially if you're not like a well-known person or anything, but it's still just better to be safe than sorry. Copywriting your book is not difficult at all. You just go on the website, and I will put the website in the comments under this video so you guys can have it. You go in there, you fill out a form, you pay the fee, and it's copywritten. You'll get a kind of like a certificate, so to speak, to say that your book is copywritten. That doesn't mean you can't make changes to the book. The solid idea for your book is there. So even if you make additions to the book or changes to the book, as long as you have proof that that original idea came from you, that's enough to protect your book in the event that somebody tries to steal it. If nobody tries to steal it, then you really don't need the copywriting thing. It'll just be something you did to safeguard yourself, but that's basically what it's for. So I would say to do that. But again, I will do a little bit of research just to make sure my thinking is right on that, for that. So, because once you have an agent, you do sell them the rights to your book. So you don't have control over your book anymore after you sign a contract. So that's what I want to check on. I want to check on that process of you copywriting it and them buying the rights to your book. How does that copywriting now work if you sell the rights away to your book? Again, I'll put some more information about that in the group. So, and I think that's copywriting. Okay, so Artesia asked about copywriting before or after you publish, which let me go into the self-publishing and then I'll cover that one because it's more goes with that one than this one. So, so here, that's the thing for traditional publishing. So now we'll get into self-publishing. So after deciding, after you finish your book, of course, you have to decide if you want to self-publish or traditional publish. Traditional publishing, I'll go through that a little bit more later. But the main thing about self-publishing, which is different from traditional publishing, which I hope you guys have picked up on by now, is that self-publishing is an emphasis on self. You're doing everything yourself. So if you think about the whole traditional publishing process, you don't have any help with that unless you pay somebody to do it. So that's the main difference between publishing and self-publishing. Then you need to decide what kind of self-publishing you want to do. Let me go back. So because there are different types of self-publishing, which I will go into probably in the next slide or two. Another thing that you need as a self-publisher is an ISBN number. So this kind of can connect to another question that was asked, I think, Cheryl, about exclusively publishing on Amazon. So when you publish it on Amazon's platform, they can give you an ISBN number for your book themselves, but you cannot sell that book under that ISBN outside of Amazon. So for example, if you take an Amazon ISBN number and somebody wants to go to a bookstore, say Barnes and Nobles, and look up your book with your ISBN number, they're not going to be able to find it. They can only find that book on Amazon. So now if you buy your own ISBN number and apply it to your book, it's in the catalog of nationwide, not nationwide, worldwide books. So that's what ISBN number. They catalog all the books that have been printed and sold that has an ISBN number. It's a library, a huge library of all the books written and published. So if you want people to be able to have access to your book outside of Amazon, you will need to have your own ISBN number and put it in that system. Deciding whether you want to just do Amazon, you can do that because Amazon is such a huge platform. If you want to just have your book on Amazon, you can, and it might work out well for you, but you are doing yourself a little bit of a disservice to only have your book there for some people who may not have access to Amazon, especially if you want to get your book into bookstores, because Amazon is not going to, say for example, Barnes and Nobles, people are requesting your book at a local bookstore, and the owner of the bookstore wants to get some copies of your book in their bookstore. They can't Amazon and say, hey, Amazon, we want to get copies of this book. We want to purchase it from you because you're the one that's printing it. Amazon is not going to be able to do that because their ISBN number cannot leave Amazon. So you're kind of doing yourself a disservice to limit your book only to Amazon. You can do that. But again, for local mom and pop shops, for other major bookstores, even for libraries, you can't put your Amazon ISBN number even in a public library. So I think it's better. And your book can have several ISBN numbers. So don't think if it has an Amazon ISBN, it cannot have another ISBN, a more nationally recognized ISBN. It can have both. So I would say to have your own ISBN number for that book if you want it to spread more than just be on Amazon. And if people want to get access to your book, that they can get it in different places and not just funnel everything through Amazon. So it's just kind of up to you about how you want to do it and how far you want your book to go. Like if you trying to become a best-selling author and you have other book ideas and you're going to keep publishing books and stuff like that, then you definitely want to make it bigger than Amazon. If you just like, I'm just doing this for fun, this is probably going to be the only book that I publish. I don't really care about selling that many copies. I just wanted my family and friends to have it, things like that. Then you can just probably stay on Amazon. So it really just kind of depends what you see for yourself in your book to kind of determine what will be the best route for you. Another thing when it comes to self-publishing that you will need is book formatting and a cover. Again, if you were going the traditional publishing route, this would be done for you. You probably would be asked your feedback on some of these things, but for the most part, they do it for you. They handle it. They also handle proofreading and editing, but as a self-published author, you have to do this for yourself. Again, like I said in the beginning, this will probably be one of the highest expenses that you will have. I would say the first one is marketing, and the second one is definitely proofreading. Make sure you go to a solid person that you trust. Try to get multiple rounds of it if you can. But I can go into this a little bit more later. You will also need to get your book digitally converted, because Amazon, they have their platform set up where you can do a digital version and a printed version. But even when you submit it to Amazon, you need to have it in the digital version, convert it into the digital version yourself before you can upload it to Amazon. You cannot upload a Word document to Amazon for your digital book the same way you do for your printed book. So you need to get it digitally converted. You can go to places like Fiverr, which is a platform that has independent creators, independent workers that do things like this for people without, having to kind of buy into a whole team of people. You can just kind of pay people to do individually the stuff that you need to be done. Some of this stuff, like you could probably do book formatting and the book cover yourself, but then you need some help with digital conversion, or you can do the digital conversion yourself, which I doubt, but I'm just mentioning that. And then you probably need help with something else. So one thing about the self-published author is that even though a lot of these things are up to you and you have to cover the cost, you can pick and choose what you want to pay for and what you don't want to pay for, what you can do yourself basically. But don't do things yourself if it's going to make the professional quality of your book go down. Just go ahead and pay somebody to do it professionally, because your book is going to have to compete with so many other books. Like the self-publishing market is totally saturated now, and that's on top of the traditional publishing market, which always have a more professional presentation and more access to different bookstores and things like that. Your book has to compete with those. So you don't want to shortchange your book by cutting costs, trying to keep costs down, and then it doesn't look professional at all. People just, that book doesn't look right, it looks cheap, and they don't pay it any attention. So keep that in mind as well. Another thing you're going to need is a website and social media presence and branding. So we talked about that. I talked about this a little bit about having a platform and things like that. If you have a traditional publisher, they will help you with this stuff. You have to do this yourself. You need a website. Some people try to avoid having a website. They think they don't need a website. If you don't have a website now, especially as a professional person, people don't even take you seriously anymore these days without a website. And you need a social media presence. And your social media presence should link people back to your website, because there's only so much you can put on social media. And you want to, and social media gives you the ability to keep in regular contact with readers, but your website will give them more in-depth information about you and your brand and what you represent, and maybe future things you have coming out, other stuff you're doing and stuff like that. So you need to have them both, a website and a social media presence, and you need to have good branding. So find out what you represent, how to communicate that to people, what type of colors and things you need, what type of logo. This is something that I also offer in my business to help authors with that. But this is something that sometimes as a writer, you just have an idea about something. You're not thinking about all of this type of stuff, because this goes into the marketing side. And all people who are writers are not marketers. So it's almost like you have to take off your writing hat and put on your marketing hat as a self-published author, because you have to do all of these things yourself. And sometimes it's very overwhelming and it's very confusing, because this is not something that you're automatically gifted in or even interested in doing, but it's something as a self-published author that you have to do. You also will need marketing knowledge and support, because it is a very uphill battle for self-published authors. And if you don't have that support there, sometimes you might give up halfway in the road and say, I can't do this, because it is a lot. And you also need a lot of marketing knowledge to make sure you accumulate what you need to get your book out there. So as a self-published author, you have to do everything yourself, and that is production, distribution, marketing, and warehousing. A professionally finished book can range from $100 to $2,500. So you can also use I told you can cut costs by some people can do some things themselves. Like me, I have graphic design skills. I can do my cover and my book formatting myself. But you can also get a publishing coach or a writing coach to kind of help you navigate some of these things, because it is a lot. I will tell you right now, marketing is going to be a pain in the behind. There's no way around it. You have to deal with it. You have to figure out the best way to navigate it, and you're going to need some help with it. Another thing you need as a self-published author is book selling platforms such as Amazon, Smashwords, and Ingram Spark. You need to have people to have multiple ways to access copies of your book. If you really want to get it out there, which I went into a little bit before about what your vision is for your book and what platforms you should use. Smashwords does not do physical copies of books, but they do digital copies of books. But there's a lot of platforms out there that you can use to sell your book from. But I would kind of stick with the major ones because you don't want to spread yourself too thin. Because you have to do everything yourself, you don't want to take on too much and try to get your book on 10 different platforms because that's going to be a lot of work for you. I would pick a solid 3, maybe 4 big platforms. Make sure some of those platforms also distribute to bookstores if they want to request your book, and then just go from there. And it's not something that's taking up too much of your time. So let me see. Here are some self-publishing models. You can do a subsidy, self-publishing, vanity, and they also have self-publishing, and then print on demand. So with the subsidy, you pay for the book's printing and binding process. So this is a little bit of like a hybrid one. So you pay for the book's printing and binding process, and the publisher pays for a portion of the cost to edit, distribute, and market the book. This is more of a hybrid situation. Vanity, you pay for all of your services, but you own the book and receive the profits. And this is the best option for hobbyists and those who use personal goal, those whose personal goal is to see their work in print. They're not necessarily trying to be professional, reoccurring published authors. Self-publishing, you pay to produce, market, distribute, and warehouse the book. That is better for authors with an established fan base and those with time-sensitive manuscripts. And then you have the print on demand, which is that you use your own money to produce books one at a time through a company. And this is a good choice if you are writing a family history, memoir, or poetry and have a limited audience. So these are just some ideas to get you going about, to get your brain going about how you want to do your own self-publishing. For me, I pay for everything, and then I found a platform like we talked about, Amazon, stuff like that, to distribute the book for me. And then of course I have to do my own marketing and things like that. So I think this is a good place to answer Artesia's question about packaging as an author. One of the ways you can package, I will tell you, I took a book marketing course. It was over $1,000 course some years ago. And one of the things that the guy who ran the program talked about was having something to sell other than your book. If you have a book to sell and that's it, it almost creates a little bit more stress for you, especially when it comes to book deals and how much you want to price the book and things like that, because that's your bread and butter and that's what you have put all your work into. But if you have other products to sell outside of just the book, you can be a little bit more flexible with your book, the price of your book, how you want to market and distribute your book, because you know it's basically you're trying to upsell them at some point. And if you're selling them another product or service, it's typically going to be more than the cost of your book. So they were really emphasizing that you need to come up with something else to sell besides your book. If you just have your book, it's most likely never going to create a lucrative regular income for you. You'll get books, you'll get money every now and again when you get book sales. Maybe if you do a show or something like that, like I said, you can go to expos and things like that. You may have a burst in sales, but for the most part, that's all you will be able to expect. But if you also do coaching, or if you also do speaking engagements, and you also have other products and things like that to sell, it creates more streams of revenue for you than just your book. So you may go to an expo and sell a nice amount of books, but then you have people calling you from that expo who bought your book. It's like, hey, how much is it to have you come and sell events? And so you want to have other things to sell besides your book. So with you, Artesia, I would go into saying, when you package that, you need to make sure your branding is good, your messaging is good, and you can say all of that on your website. So once you have a website that gives people a professional presentation of you, what you stand for, what you're about, you have to make sure your branding is good. The colors, this is what you'll probably need a graphic designer for, just to make sure you get everything to look professional, but you want to just have all of that stuff in one place. So, and the main place you can do that is on your own website. So just make sure it's uniform, make sure it looks good, make sure it complements each other. So for example, a lot of my books revolve around personal development, and I am also a life and relationship coach. So it goes with my books. You don't want to have a children's book and then your service that you're offering is like, you know, you're selling something that doesn't go with children's books. So just keep that in mind and make sure it all works together. Again, for my business that I have where I help authors, I can help you fine tune and polish your stuff. Even if you create stuff on your own and you just want somebody to look at it to make sure it looks professional and things like that, I do that as well. So I have a lot of like services where you can customize them for what you exactly need. So you're not paying for stuff that you don't need. Because there are some companies, especially when it comes to the hybrid publishing, that they offer a package and you have to pay for the whole package, even if you don't need everything in the package. But sometimes people have to take it because, you know, they can't do it themselves. With me, you only pay for what you need. So if you need a website, I can help you with the website. If you want to do the website yourself and you just want a professional to look at it and tell you how to fix it, or if it looks good, I can also do that as well. So you want to just make sure all of that stuff looks really, really good, and make sure your messaging and everything fits together. So if you have any more questions about that, Artesia, please feel free to visit my website and set up a free time to talk to me in more detail about it. Again, I will put the link for that under this video in the group once we're done. Copywriting, I'm just making sure. Agents, copywriting, media kit. Okay, so I think this is a good time to go into Jennifer's questions about the media kit. You definitely need a media kit as a self-published author. You're going to be going out making contacts, especially if you do expos and things like that. You want to have something very quick that people can look over and get a lot of information about you, especially if you're selling other services besides your book. So if you want to do speaking, if you want to do coaching, some people write books about, you know, sports stuff, and then they offer training sessions and things like that. So you want to have all that stuff spelled out very quickly on a media kit. You want to make sure the media kit looks good and professional. And you can create a media kit. They have, sometimes I use Canva to create some certain things, but they have a lot of platforms that you can use to create those things on your own if you're good at stuff like that. If you're not, just pay somebody else to do it. It's going to be worth it for you to just make it look professional than to try to, you know, trying to cut costs and it looks like you cut costs. So again, I do media kits. If you make a media kit yourself and you just want me to look at it, I can also do that. But I would advise using Canva to do that. Canva does offer a lot of templates to just plug your information in there. You can do that if you want to. I would advise against it because then other people's media kits might look like your own because they did the same thing. So but that is an option that you can use if that's something that you want to do. And with the templates that they have on Canva for media kits, they will kind of give you spaces to show you what you need on the media kit. So of course you need your contact information, your products, your services, a short bio about who you are. Nowadays on media kits, they want to know your social media following. So some people will have their social media numbers right there on the front of the media kit. And, you know, just any type of information that makes what you're offering appealing to whoever you're trying to have it appeal to. And Jennifer, you also talked about the jacket of the book, which I'll go ahead and cover that now because I think that's the last question that was asked. Again, I do book covers, but so for soft covered books, you don't need a jacket. So to me, when you talk about a jacket, I'm thinking about that plastic jacket that goes over a hardcover book. That's actually what a jacket is. If your book is not a hardcover book, you don't need a jacket for it. So those only go for hardcover books. So Amazon used to not offer hardcover books with their self-publishing printing services, but now they do. But your book needs to be a certain number of pages before. You should keep in mind the number of pages of your book before you consider hard copy or soft copy. Typically, hard copy books are books with higher number of pages, and then the soft ones are usually lower number of pages, but you can do either one. It just depends on how you want your book to look. Of course, it's going to cost you more for Amazon to print the book for you if it's hardcover. Amazon will give you the dimensions of what the book cover should look like to put it on the book. And then you have somebody else create it, or you create it, and you know, a lot of these programs that they have now, and then you submit the document in the format that they want it in to cover the book. They will give you an example. I'm sure that's not the right word, but they will allow you to see what it looks like, what it will look like on the book. They will also tell you if there's something wrong with your cover and they can't use it, and they'll to give you some ideas of how to fix it. But you need to have a professional cover copy of your book. This is also something that I go over in my course about what you need to keep in mind for covers of your book. But you want to make sure you have a digital copy of your book, which is only a digital version of your book cover, which is only the front page. Digital versions do not have back parts to them. So you want that first front page. It also needs to have a spine, depending on the number of pages. Of course, you need your name, your title, author, and you need to have that short bio thing on the back, or synopsis on the back of the book. If you have any more questions about the book cover or the jacket of the book, you can let me know, but that's kind of my information about that. And you need to be really careful about the cover of your book, because some people pick really bad covers, especially if they do them themselves. And that is one of the primary or the first impressions that people will have of your book is the cover. So it's very, very important. I tell people in my classes, the book cover is not for you, it's for your customers. So make sure you have a book cover that appeals to the people you want to read it, not something that you like, that you think is fancy and it doesn't fit with what your genre is or the audience you're trying to appeal to or anything like that. So if you have any more questions about that, I'll give you guys a little bit of time to discuss it at the end. And I'm almost done here, so we'll wrap up here shortly. I just want to go over these, just like I did with the self-publishing. I kind of gave you a synopsis of everything. And I'm going to do this again with the self-publishing. And so here are the steps. Number one is that you're planning and outlining your book. Number two, you write your book. Then you do the self-editing. Then you have the professional editing. Then you do proofreading to go over what the professional editor tells you to change, and you do that through the proofreading. Then you need to make sure you get a cover design, write your blurb, which is the piece on the back of the book about you and your book and things like that. You can find a lot of templates and formats for that online if that's something that you think you need help with. And again, if you write something and you want somebody to have somebody take a look at it and tell you how it sounds or how it reads and things like that, then you can contact me for that. I will be willing to do that one for free. And then you need to come up with a price for your book. Then you need to format your book, the pages and things like that, which is a whole nother process. If you want more information about that, let me know. Then you need to get the distribution down, which is the platforms you're going to use, like Amazon, Ingram Spark, things like that. Then you need to do promotion, which is basically marketing. And if you're not totally exhausted by that process of self-publishing and you want to do another one, then you start all this process all over again. So this is basically the basic steps of self-publishing. You can see, again, with the emphasis being on self-publishers have their work cut out for them. And so before we wrap up here, I just want to go over some of the main differences between the two. So with self-publishing, all your costs are upfront. You are solely responsible for the production, distribution, and marketing of your book. You keep your royalties, which I didn't really go into very much, but one of the benefits of self-publishing is that you keep all of your royalties and you set your own prices. You do not have the ability, you don't do that when it comes to traditional publishing. You also set your own timelines and work at your own pace. So when you have a traditional publisher, you're on their time. So if they tell you we need this manuscript completed in 6 months, you have 6 months to get it done. And most of the time, since we are not, as writers, it's not our full-time job, you still have to work, you still have to take care of your kids, you still have other things to do. So it can create a lot of stress from you if you're on this timeline and you might not be able to keep up with it. For some people, it may not be a problem, but it's just something you want to keep in mind. That self-publishing, you can work at your own pace. Also for self-publishing, from beginning to end stage and getting your books actually on the shelves is faster in self-publishing. It takes an average of about 6 months. And again, you keep the rights and control of your book. So if you do traditional publishing, you do not have any control over your book anymore. You might have some wording in the contract that gives you some control, and that's why you need to have a lawyer look over it. But for the most part, when it comes to traditional publishing, you lose this. You lose the rights of your book and you lose control over your book. And that's just something you should know ahead of time. So for traditional publishing, it could take a while to find an agent, and it's very, very competitive. I know I was looking for an agent for a little over a year. I did not find one. The main thing that I kept hearing was that I had really good ideas and they liked what I was saying, but that I did not have a big enough platform for them to be willing to take the risk on me. And so this can easily be turned into a very long process. So keep that in mind. And of course, with anything that's taking a long time, it can be frustrating. Another thing with traditional publishing is that there's no upfront expenses besides fares and whatever you might spend on your proposal. At traditional publishing, they handle all the legwork and it's easier and wider distribution, but your royalties are smaller. You lose the rights and control of your book. And of course, added stress from being on somebody else's timeline and the process of from beginning to end, getting your book completed and out on the shelves can take usually about a year and a half. So, so that's it for my presentation on, self-publishing versus traditional publishing. I know it's a lot of information. You guys can go back and watch this video and get some, take some notes if you need to. I think I answered anybody's question, but I'm wondering if you have any questions in the meantime. So I see the box down here. There's some questions here. Okay. Looks like Jennifer said, do the publishing house expect you to market your book or do they cover the cost? So they will ask you to, they cover the cost. So at any time of traditional publishing, the main difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing is that you have somebody covering the cost for you. If you get into one of these hybrid situations, they might say, hey, we'll print the book and we'll do the book cover, but you have to market the book yourself. So you just got to figure out who you're dealing with and what they expect from you. But in traditional publishing route where you have an agent and a publishing house and they're doing everything for you, they cover the marketing, but they will ask you to be available. So like do interviews and things like that. They'll set up the whole marketing thing for you with their connections, and they want you to be available to do the things that they need you to do to market the book well so that they can make money from their book. I see your hand up, Cheryl. And Jennifer has a second question, but I'll go ahead and take your question now, and then I'll go to her second question later. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for a great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
But while you were speaking, I thought about audio. What are your thoughts on audio versions of a book? And I inquire because I'm blind. And so most of my friends, use audio.
Yeah, so this is becoming, of course, more popular now with everybody having a small computer in their pockets all day, every day. I think it's definitely in your benefit to get your book put in audio. Me personally, I'm busy. And that's the only way I can read books now is if I have audio, because I can listen to it when I'm washing the dishes. I can listen to it when I'm running errands and things like that. So I do think it's very lucrative, a very good idea to get your book done, translated over into audio, but you need to do it professionally. And so I know some people who, go into the studio, they'll read the book themselves if they have a really good voice and talent for that, or they have to pay somebody else to read the book for them. It has to be done in the studio. You want to make sure it's good quality and things like that. But I definitely think that that's something that every author should be doing at this point, because it's becoming just a really big way, especially in our busy lifestyle that we have here, to be able to have easier access to your book is through audio. So if you want me to kind of post some more information about how to do that, how much it costs, things like that, I will look some things up and post it in the group. So,
Thank you. Yeah, because I know there are several avenues, so it's hard to choose.
Yeah, it is, and you just want to make sure that is professional. So whoever you have to do professional, you want to make sure the files are recorded in a way that you can upload it to those platforms. So you can check the platforms, for example, Audible. What type of audio file do they want your books to be in for it to be uploaded there? So you need to have all of that information ahead of time so that you make sure you do professional, right quality. It will be terrible for you to have it done and then it's not even the right format that they need. So you need to get that information, but I'll post about that in the group because I think that's really important for authors to know. So for the second question that Jennifer has, she said, do we need to add an ISBN before copyright? If you self-publish? No, you don't need to. You can get an ISBN anytime. I had a client of mine who purchased a package of ISBN numbers. She purchased a package of 10 ISBN numbers. She only needed one, but she just bought them ahead of time so that once she got ready to publish her books that she had in mind to publish, she already had ISBN numbers. So there's no set time where you should get them before you copyright or anything like that. You just have to have them to publish your book. So even if you start publishing on Amazon and you use their ISBN number, you still don't need an ISBN number right away. But if you want to kind of start having a wider distribution and getting your book out there more, then that's probably the time where you have to have an ISBN number. Some of these platforms will offer you to use their ISBN numbers that they have pre-purchased. But it's kind of up to you. So you can use theirs, you can get your own. You don't have to have before you copyright or anything like that. So you just kind of play it by ear about what you want to do. The main thing about ISBN numbers that you have to keep in mind is it gives people an easy way to find your book. So if you think about the library of all books that have been published, there are millions of books there, and all of these libraries and bookstores operate on this system. So if you want your book to be easily found in this huge library of books by most of the major and even smaller bookstores, it's best to have an ISBN number in that catalog for your book. So if it's just on Amazon or if it's just on IngramSpark and stuff like that, those other companies won't have access, or other avenues that sell books won't have access to your book. So that's the main thing you need to keep in mind. If you don't care that your book is just on Amazon or all that, then it's not a big deal. So you just kind of have to decide for yourself what you want. So yeah, any other questions? No other questions. So yes, that's it for my presentation on self-publishing and traditional publishing. Sometimes I get a little tongue-tied when I'm talking. It used to kind of stress me out, but now I just ignore it and keep moving. So, but sorry about that sometimes when I do that. But if you have any other questions or anything like that about anything that I covered or any of the services that I offer for authors in my own business, again, I will post the link for my website under this video, probably within the hour after we're done here. And some of the information that you also asked for, I will make sure I put some things about that in the group. But other than that, you all have a good day. Oh, let me say this. For my next free webinar, do you guys have any topics that you think you would want me to cover? I know some people were saying that
Marketing.
Yeah, that's the beast for self-publishers. This market.
It is the monster of,
Yeah.
because they said most authors don't even make minimum wage. So
yeah, and it all boils back to marketing. So, and that's the thing, when you have traditional publishers, they already have contacts to help you with that. But if you're a single person and you don't, like, how am I supposed to get my books in Barnes and Nobles? They won't even look at me, so it's the monster. I totally agree. And so I will definitely give some tips about marketing for my next webinar. So yeah. All right, so I don't want to take up any more of you ladies' time. It's Sunday. People should be relaxing, getting ready for Monday. Thank you for tuning in. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I do have a lot of freebies with the services that I offer. So make sure you keep an eye out for those. And that's it. So thank you all for coming, and you have a good evening. And I will hopefully see you next month with the next webinar.